Hello, this is James, and here we have the preview of L-Swarms. We're getting some good Steelswarms in the Lords of Shining mini box. The purpose of this video is to give you some ideas of how to build a Steelswarms deck right out of the box, give you some combinations, some side decks, and some possible skills for your lovely new cards. I want to talk about the Steelswarms. So first we're going to talk about the ones that I would include in the Steelswarms deck, and then the other ones that are new, I will still talk about, but I'm going to talk about them later because I don't want you to get distracted. So Steelswarms actually look to be like the simplest and the cheapest deck that you could possibly build, because all the Steelswarm cards, Moth is the only super rare that is new. And then, you know, in this deck you can also use Grebo, because you can use Grebo in like every deck. So basically all you're doing is you're special summoning Steelswarm Cell, or you're setting Scout and then setting a rival. So you have Steelswarm Cell. If you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. While this card is face up on the field, it cannot be tributed except for the tribute summon of a Steelswarm monster. Cannot be used as synchro material monster. And I know when you special summon your Cell, you're thinking about the enemy Canadia, the Canadia Steelswarm Cell. The name goes away. You can't use it for Girastag, can't use it for Moth. Fear not, when you tribute summon, it still goes through. It still counts as a Steelswarm used for Autobahn Shokan. Steelswarm Cell, free special summon, but it's very restricted. However, it's restricted to these two excellent Steelswarm monsters. So if you were saving up your Steelswarms, if you got all the Steelswarms out of the old box, you know, well, they were just rare as normal, so it's not a big deal. But you can just take them and throw them in the garbage, because we have the good Steelswarms now. Girastag and Moth, and both of them can come off of one tribute. So Girastag, you can tribute summon this monster in face-up attack position by tributing one Steelswarm monster. When this card is tribute summoned by tributing a Steelswarm, you can target one card your opponent controls, send that target to the graveyard, gain 1,000 life points. Get rid of the Shien for free. Shien doesn't move the effect onto a different monster. Shien is not protected by Fuma. Shien just gets sent to the graveyard quietly and honorably. And then Steelswarm Moth, which I correctly called as a super rare. Steelswarm Moth, when this card is tribute summoned by tributing a Steelswarm, you can pay 1,000 life points to target up to 2 cards your opponent controls, return those targets to the hand. So Moth is level 6, it only needs 1 tribute anyway. So special summon Cell, normal summon the Moth, and you get a free dual wield at the cost of 1,000 life points. Now, we're not always going to top deck Steelswarm Cell. Sometimes we have to rely on Steelswarm Scout. At the start of your main phase, if you control no spell or trap cards, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. You cannot special summon another monster during the turn you activate this effect. While this card is face up on the field, it cannot be tributed except for the tribute summon of a Steelswarm monster, and cannot be used as a synchro material monster. So again, restricted to Steelswarms, but you know what? He's great. So you normal summon this, well, you set the Scout. The way you play Scout is you set the Scout, and then you set your rivals, and then on your opponent's turn, you can disrupt, you can Girastag, send something in the graveyard, Moth, get rid of the normal summon, get rid of a back row, and then prepare the field. And then on your next turn, you can bring Scout back, and then you can get something, you can get another Moth, you can get another Girastag, and then you can just attack directly very easily. And then the other Steelswarm card that we're using is Infestation Terminus. Target one L-Swarm monster you control and 2 cards your opponent controls. Banish the first target, and if you do, return the second targets to the hand. So it's, you know, like Steelswarm Moth. But it does banish the card, so you can't Treeborn Frog the Steelswarm Scout repeatedly as much as I would like to. And finally, we're using Sphere Karibo to protect our monsters because they are a little bit fragile. Now, the final new Steelswarm card that I'm actually not including is Infestation Infection. This is a continuous trap card. Once returned, you can shuffle 1 L-Swarm monster from your hand or face up on your side of the field to the main deck. Add 1 L-Swarm monster from your deck to your hand. So I feel like this doesn't actually work very well in this new Steelswarms because it makes Scout not function. Scout, like Treeborn Frog, you can't have spell or trap cards. And that's also why we're not using Escalation of the Monarchs in this build of the deck. We're using a Rivals, gets rid of the evidence, and then we can continuously use Steelswarm Scout as more tributes, as more efficiency, as more card advantage to defeat our opponent. The other L Swarm card that is being added with this new mini box is Evil Swarm Mandragora. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. This doesn't work with Steelswarms because there has to be a Steelswarm tribute, but you know, you can use it in Hazy. You can use it probably for Xyz summoning. You can use it for Synchro Shokan. This is another super rare, but it doesn't really fit into this deck. But you know, he's so good that he's worth mentioning in a video that he's completely off the topic of. Infestation Infection I covered. Continuous Trap. We don't want to use this with Steelswarm Scout. Another card you might want to include side deck is coming in the Lords of Shining. Sky Scourge Invisil. This card cannot be special summoned. If you tribute summon this card by tributing one of the following monsters, this card gets the appropriate effect. Light Fairy, negate the effects of all spell and trap spell cards. Dark Fiend, which all Steelswarms are, negate the effects of all trap cards. So this, if Moth or Girastag like gets floodgated or something, you can make your very own Jinzo. You know, if you save him with a Karibo, or you go in with an Arrival Rivals, Cell, Girastag, Floodgated, Arrival Rivals, Sky Scourge, Invisil. I think that's a really fun side deck card. You can also, of course, use Card Advance, normal summon the Scout, Card Advance, order your cards, and get your Tribute Shokan. And I think that Monster Reborn could be good. Target 3 monsters in your graveyard. Your opponent chooses one, you special summon it, and if you do, banish the rest. You can only activate one Monster Reborn per turn. You're just getting more tributes. You're just getting you're diversifying, and you're making use of cards that maybe had no use before. Escalation of the Monarchs, does not work with Steelswarm Scout. I do feel like you need both of these because you can't just rely on top decking the Steelswarm Cell. Unless, maybe you could cut the Scout for Infestation Infection, and then you can always search the Steelswarm Cell, but that's a trap, right? You have to rely on the trap. You have to wait for your opponent to Cosmic Cyclone it or something. I prefer to use spell cards to get my tribute monsters out on the field to negate my opponent's card advantage. Soul Exchange, kind of slow. And Illusory Snatcher. When you tribute summon a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If you do, type, attribute, level of this card becomes same as the face of tribute summon monster. So this gives you, you could throw in enemy controller, Illusory Snatcher, tribute the Illusory Snatcher, steal the opponent's monster, and Illusory Snatcher is pure Xyz bait. So if you have Cell, tribute for Moth. Moth sends 2 things back to the hand, and then we special summon Illusory Snatcher. When we get Xyz summoning, we can go into a level 6 Xyz monster because Illusory Snatcher modulates its level. And finally, some skills that you might want to use for Steelswarms. Allured by Darkness, Ubel skill gives you the Allured by Darkness card. You draw 2, and then you banish a dark monster from your hand. And of course, you're going to be able to do that. Heavy Starter, if you need 3 different high-level monsters. So if you include, Girastag in there, you can use Heavy Starter. Baggy Sleeves, really good for this deck. If one of your high-level monsters gets destroyed by battle, next turn you can draw 2 cards. That's really strong. And of course, Beatdown because you always use Beatdown when you have high-level monsters, and Power of Darkness. Power of Darkness powers up Fiends, puts Steelswarm Moth above Xian in attack points. Now, Infestation Terminus is really good for getting your Steelswarms out of trouble if you're attacking into, if you're attacking into a wall of D, your Steelswarm Moth is going to get killed. You're not using Baggy Sleeves. Infestation Terminus, target the Steelswarm you control, banish it, and then return the 2 cards that your opponent controls to the hand. So if you attack your opponent, your Weevil has spammed out Amazonas. You can get your Steelswarm out of there and also send the Onslaught and the other monster back to the hand. Infestation Terminus. Nice little change up card. Alright, so I hope you've enjoyed this preview of Steelswarms. I hope it's of use to you when you're building your decks straight out of the box. If you're new, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching.